My name is Stijn van Nieuwerburgh, and I'm a professor of finance and the Earl Cass's and Benjamin Shore Professor of Real Estate here at Columbia Business School. So one great area of interest to me is the adoption of remote work and how it has affected commercial real estate. Before the pandemic, only about 5% of office work was done from home. Today, about half of days are worked from home for office workers. We can now do our work from wherever we want, and that has, on the whole, led to a dramatic reduction in the demand for office space. Leasing revenues have already fallen about 19% since the beginning of the pandemic. Only about a third of leases have actually come up for renewal in that period, which means the second shoe is yet to drop on the office market. And we know that if the last 3 years are any guide, that a lot of tenants will decide to either not renew that space or take less space than before. The office vacancy rate is already at an all-time high. And in a nutshell, we find that the value of the office stock has fallen by about 40% in New York City and similar in many other cities in the US. 40% reduction in value obviously has large implications for investors in real estate. Most US cities derive a substantial fraction of their tax revenues from property tax. And if property values are falling by 40%, then property tax revenues over time will fall by similar amounts. If they're collecting less property tax revenue, they need to raise taxes on other categories, or they need to cut spending. Less spending means less money for education, for transportation, for sanitation, more crime, more grime. So if there's no office workers in the city, the lunch counters and the retail stores in these urban centers are also doing poorly. We might see higher out-migration rates. That means that there's less demand for real estate, so property values would fall further, property tax revenues would fall further. That would prompt sort of a second round of tax increases or spending cuts, which would further lead people to leave. And so we get into this urban doom loop, into this vicious spiral where the city's fiscal health spirals down. One of the natural solutions is a conversion of office to apartment. Now, these office to apartment conversions have been far and few in between, typically because a lot of these offices have, for example, floor plates that are not conducive to apartment conversion. But oftentimes it's the pre-war office buildings that are conducive to conversion. The appeal of that is that we could potentially solve three problems at once. We could essentially reduce the excess of office. We could create more housing, and a lot of these older office buildings are quite brown. They have a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, and if we could convert them into modern green apartment buildings, that would help with the climate as well.